Hello and welcome to Spotlight on Senior Issues. I'm Judy Stiles, and today we're focusing on a subject dealing with veterans. And this is a series of programs that are looking at the fastest growing aspect of our population, senior citizens. And in this series you'll find out about a lot of topics that may affect you or your parents or grandparents. I'd like to start today by introducing Kelly Hook, Certified Senior Advisor, and Christopher Dunn, Attorney. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Judy.
And Kelly will be helping us as we go throughout this series with the programs. And as I mentioned, we're talking about veterans, and when we talk about senior citizens, there are a lot of veterans who fall into that category.
There are. There's a lot of veterans. There's a lot of veterans in Southwest Missouri, Northwest Arkansas, and in fact, one of the largest per capita concentration of veterans in the United States is Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, we wouldn't think it would be that local, tying that together. So we're talking about people, a large percentage, as people age, they may think, well, I've got VA benefits, and today we're going to answer some of those questions they might have as you get into that crucial time of life where some decisions need to be made.
Yes, I think the first thing we need to look at is that when we say the VA, there's actually three different divisions of the VA, and they don't always talk to each other. I think the face of the VA that we think of and what most veterans think of is the health administration, where they go to see a doctor. Yeah, the hospital, the outpatient clinics. The other is, of course, like the burial, the national cemeteries, and that's another division. The division that I deal with a lot in my practice is the Veterans Pension Center, and they deal with service-connected disability, where if you get injured while in the line of duty, they also deal with something that is not known among veterans very much, or at least for wartime veterans, and that is the non-service connected disability pension. And I tell people now, because I'll ask veterans if they were, are you a veteran? They say yes, and I'll say, did you serve during wartime? And they'll say, a lot of times they have served during a wartime period, and I'll say, well, you may be able to get a pension. They say, well, I wasn't in for 20 years, or yes, I have some health issues, but it wasn't caused because of my, service. Well, I tell them you don't have to be like Forrest Gump. You don't have to be shot in the buttocks in order to get compensation for a disability. The non-service connected disability means that you have to be 65, or if you're 65 or older, they just assume that you're disabled. No, that's not to say that you are disabled. It just means you meet that test. And there's three tests in order to get this type of pension. One is you have to be a wartime veteran, okay, and you don't have to have boots on the ground. It just means that you have to have served at least one day during a wartime period.
Served in the military.
So we're talking World War II, Vietnam.
Yes.
Korea.
Right, and the Persian Gulf. The Gulf War, I think, goes from 1990, and it is still, that conflict has not officially ended according to the VA. World War II also includes the cleanup period after war.
So occupation troops and people that were there afterwards.
Right. And then there is a period, sometimes my clients fall between World War II and Korea, and sometimes they'll have served, and as long as one day of their active duty falls in either one of those wartime periods, then they are a wartime veteran. So you have to have 90 days of active duty or more. At least one day has to be during a wartime period.
So a lot of people, as you say, Kelly, I know a certified senior advisor, you work with a lot of seniors, and this sounds like maybe it's an unknown to a lot of people as you're talking to senior citizens.
One of that non-service benefit, is that the same as in-home aid and attendance that we would work with, or is that a different animal?
There's a lot of stuff on the internet. There's a lot of things written about aid and attendance. Okay, and that is the non-service connected pension. There are three compensation levels. So there's the basic pension, where if you're over 65 and you meet certain income and asset tests, you can receive some benefit.
The government's there to help you out.
Right. The next level is if you are homebound. So
which is what I tend to deal with.
Right, and so if you're receiving home care services, if If you go to the grocery store, it's only because you live next to the grocery store and you walk over there. You don't drive anymore. Then you may meet that homebound criteria.
Okay.
Right.
The third and the most to get you the most benefit is aid and attendance, which means you need some assistance with aid and attendance.
Okay, so 3 different levels of
Right.
tying together. So a lot of people don't know about it to begin with, or making awareness is one of the big steps, so to make people aware of this and what's happening. Then the qualifications. Some people might say, well, I make too much money, I'm not going to get any benefits. How do
Right.
you address
That
those
comes
kind
up
of
a lot.
concerns?
That's right. And if they call the VA, the first question, or one of the first questions they'll ask is, how much income do you make? And you may be a wartime veteran, so you pass that test. The next test is, how much income do you make? And if somebody asks a normal person, how much income do you make? My clients usually say, well, I get this much in Social Security, and then my spouse makes this much, and maybe I have a small pension. You add all that together, well, that's how much I make a month. That's not the question the VA is asking.
That's not the right answer.
They don't define it.
Right.
Yeah. And if you call them and you give them that number, they'll say, well, you make too much
You
income.
make too much income, and then you don't
So
qualify.
then they give up on trying
And
to
they give
do
up.
it
And they
further.
give up.
Right.
And it's too soon, because they should have, it's income minus unreimbursed medical expenses.
Yes.
Okay.
So they could have $3,000 of income coming in, but if they're spending $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a month in home care services, well, then their income for VA purposes is really zero.
So it goes the other way. You're
Right.
deficit for them.
And that
Right.
includes medications, supplies like Depends, and things that are medically related, right?
It's not just
So
prescriptions
it's not
and
just
doctor care.
in-home
Correct.
care.
It's things that are recurring and are not reimbursed by
Okay.
Medicare or private insurance. An example would be a hearing aid would not qualify because that's a one-time purchase,
Right, and it's not
but
covered
the
by
batteries would.
Okay.
So
because
replacing
that-
those batteries, you have
right.
that cost on an
That's
ongoing
recurring.
basis. So really people need to be tracking down those expenses, their costs of what they're dealing with when they're in
And
some
they need to
situation.
be talking to somebody who can explain all of this to them so that they don't give the wrong answers. And they do call about their benefits as well.
At what stage do people need to be asking about these benefits? You said at age 65. Well, say someone encounters a family member and so forth and think, well, Grandpa was in the military. Do we need to be checking into this? When do we?
I would say yes. If there's a wartime veteran in your family, then you should check into this to see if you qualify. If you've met and you can, I think we should say now, there's on my website, you can go to protectingwealth.com, and we have a guide that talks about the nuts and bolts,
And Kelly
or
has
the
a
nuts and
copy of
bolts
that.
guide
Veterans benefits,
veterans benefits, and it talks in more detail than what we're going to get into today about this program. But let's say that you're a wartime veteran. Let's say that you have passed the income test because you have a lot of recurring
Out-of-pocket expenses.
medical expenses. Then they are going to look at your assets. Now, similar to Medicaid, which is another program that can help pay for some medical care, a personal residence, a car, those are exempt assets. They don't necessarily look at that.
Okay.
They look at everything else. One difference from Medicaid right now, and that's kind of a disclaimer, right now.
Laws change, right?
Right, and there is a potential law change that we'll talk about in a little bit, but right now there's no penalty for gifting.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in Medicaid, if you were to give to a family member, let's say you gave them some of the family farm, and then you applied for Medicaid maybe 6 months or a year later, that can penalize you for the value of what you transferred.
You gave away something you were supposed to have in the government's eyes.
That's correct. And the VA does not have that penalty yet. They did issue some proposed regulations in January of this year. Typically, when they issue proposed regulations, they get a handful of comments during the 60-day comment period. This time they received several hundred comments.
People wanted to make some thought.
So this was on the radar screen of a lot of people. I know a lot of attorneys, a lot of trade groups have written in. They're going to have to deal with those comments before these proposed regulations become final. But people need to know that if they're thinking about, well, maybe I want to gift something or do some VA pension planning now, or maybe we'll wait, a few months, I would say, you probably better get on this, because it very well could become law.
They could change those
Yes,
rules.
and there could be a
Rules
look-back period.
And working that together. So a lot of things people need to look at in the qualification. You say assets, so if somebody has, say 401ks or IRAs or something that they've established, those financial items that they may have, stocks and bonds, would be part of their assets.
They do, yeah, they do. And so you can get like a double hit where they say, well, you have to, you either have to give this away, and that can, if someone's going to give assets away, because they might be disabled in the future, taxes are for sure. If you pull all your money out of your retirement plan, you will be taxed within a year on those assets. Whereas if you pull them out and gift them away, if you became mentally incapacitated or needed some assistance, you would qualify. But that's an if, so you have to make sure that the price you pay to move that across the fence is worth it.
So I've got a couple of good stories, and I like stories.
People like to hear how it actually applies.
How does it
to
actually
people.
apply? And my great aunt was actually a widow of a wartime veteran. So widowers actually can qualify
So they get
for
some
these
benefits as well.
As well. And she did not have. She had just enough assets for it, not to qualify for a lot of assistance. But once she started getting the in-home care, she was able to get that in-home aid and attendance off of her husband's service, and he had passed away, and she was able to afford to have a caregiver coming into her home 3 days a week. As she aged, the next year she began to have more needs, and so the family went back to the VA with her additional care needs, and also the fact that the bill had gone up, and submitted the expenses. You have to have the expenses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you need to have the expenses already.
Show that you are spending the money before you can ask for money.
Before you can ask for the money. So she was already spending additional funds, and they were able to up the money they were reimbursing her, up to the point where I think she was able to get around $1,000 a month or something like that. That was significant. She only had to finally go into an assisted living facility just a couple of months before she passed away. She was able to stay in her home that her and her husband were in, that her children lived in, with all those memories, for about 2 years longer than she would have been able to otherwise. And these were my cousins. They didn't know about the Veteran Aid and Attendance benefit. So that was a really neat thing for me to see.
Tie to see it how it works
to
for
see it
family.
work. The other thing that I've had problems with, and so when he talks about getting things in gear early rather than later, I'm finding that a lot of people will end up on hospice care. And once they're on hospice care, they will look into these in-home aid and attendance benefits. And I have yet to see anybody approved that was on hospice care. So even though hospice care may extend over a period of a year or two, the VA seems to be looking at it as, look, they're on hospice care, we're looking at less than 6 months of life generally, and the benefits take a while to get approved. So the chances of them even being approved while they're still alive are basically slim to nothing. It's the way I feel like they're thinking, correct me if I'm wrong. And if they pass away while they're getting approved, then those benefits never come to them. Is that correct?
Well, you said several things there.
Okay.
I'm not surprised, because to get hospice care, that means there's a more than likely, I guess, chance that you will not live 6 months.
Right.
In the VA, this program, they are looking at what will be, what is your income, what are your medical expenses over the next 12 months.
12 months.
And so they are looking outward. So I'm not surprised that, and I probably shouldn't say this. In my opinion, they like to deny things.
They make you really have to work to get
the
benefits, right?
to get those benefits.
One of my attorney friends in Chicago says, told me one time, he said, Chris, the mission statement of the VA is to protect the U.S. Treasury from awarding benefits to the veterans they're supposed to take care of. Now, that's a pretty cynical definition, and so I always attribute it to him because I would never want to attribute it to me. But it can be very frustrating dealing with the pension center. When we first started doing this a number of years ago and representing veterans before the VA, these applications were taking 6 to 9 months to go through. Now, this is the middle of 2015. Things are taking about 2 months, so 2 to 3 months. So they have sped up, and I'm happy about that. But yeah, sometimes they speed up by saying no, and then you have to go back and supplement information, or they'll lose information, or if they don't have documentation, everything gets blamed on the St. Louis fire.
Your records of service are no longer there because the place burned down, right?
Yeah, that is not always the case, but.
Well, what type of records do people need to have then to prove that service? The discharge papers.
Yes.
What does?
You need discharge papers. If it's the Korean War going forward, then the form is called a DD-214, and if the veteran can converse with you, they know exactly what a DD-214 is. If it's World War II or back, then it's just called a separation papers. But you'll need that, and you need the original. If you can't find the original, then we need to get the original.
Interesting.
If you have an original, then a VA accredited attorney can certify a copy, because you never want to send an original to the VA because they could lose it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing you need. You need evidence of your income, probably evidence of unreimbursed medical expenses, and a list of your assets and valuations.
So for a lot of families, it probably becomes a challenge gathering this material, for an individual family to say, where do we get this paperwork? How do we put it together?
That's why it's better to start early than later. You talked about a VA certified attorney.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
In order to practice before the VA, an attorney, or to represent a client before the VA, an attorney has to go through the procedure and be accredited by the VA in order to do that. We've done that so that way we can go ahead and talk to the VA and represent our clients before the Veterans Administration.
Okay, that's good to know.
So for someone who's facing this challenge of how do I gather this, what role the attorney plays then, explain for what you would do then, help them in, I guess, basically putting together the package of materials for them, what they need to have.
Right. The clients that we serve, we're typically doing VA pension planning in a long-term care planning situation.
Right.
So this is one element of a larger plan, and if we're doing a strategy for one of our clients, then we represent our clients on a pro bono basis, which is legalese for free before the VA.
Yeah, nobody can charge money to help people do their paperwork for these benefits.
They're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to.
The government says you can't be charged to do this paperwork, so you're helping them and tying that together. So it's really a piece of an overall pie of how are you going to plan for the future.
Yes, it's part when usually the client doesn't come in and say, I want a VA pension. First of all, I've already said they don't even know. They don't even know it's there. Most of them don't. They're like, really? That's in there? Is that legal? Like, yes, it's a benefit there. It's a piece of the overall question of how do I not lose everything if I become unwell?
Right.
And so we're trying to solve that problem, and this is a very important piece. One thing we haven't hit on is, if I do get the pension, how much is it?
Right.
It can be anywhere from $100 to $2,000 a month, tax-free.
Right.
So that's a real shot in the arm for a lot of my clients for helping to pay for home care or assisted living or even skilled nursing care.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of people, we're mentioning home care, assisted living, they may be watching thinking, well, insurance will pay for that.
Exactly.
Insurance does the assumption that everything's going to be covered by insurance when I get old.
No, Medicare does not cover assisted living, doesn't cover in-home care. Those types of things are covered by a long-term care insurance policy. They're covered by in-home aid and attendance for a veteran if they qualify, or right out of your savings, out of your pocket.
And that's what we hear a lot with a lot of people, that they end up having to take down that piggy bank that they've saved up for years.
And I tell you, I spend a lot of my time trying to help people figure out how, finding ways that people can afford to have the in-home care that they want. And I love it when people go talk to Chris or the other attorneys about, where can we pull money from to make it possible to live at home and stay where we want to be. Right. It's important to do that early. It's important to plan ahead. And the volume of paperwork that you have to fill out for this it can be really tough for our elderly people to do. They definitely would need an attorney or a family member or somebody to really help them with this. It's complicated from what I've seen.
The application is, if I'm remembering correctly, is close to 20 pages long. And like I say, our experience has been that the VA loses a lot of things. Things that you sent them, certified.
They haven't gone paperless yet?
They haven't gone paperless yet, at least not in my experience.
So the bureaucracy of the government causes many problems.
Yes.
And tying that together. So for a lot of people, I say the older senior citizens, the people who might be those World War II veterans and that come from that different, they might have some assets because they've saved all their life. So they're not necessarily broke. They're not losing the family home right away. But they come to you. They come to and talk to you about, okay, I've got some money, but how do I make it last?
Right. How do we make it last and make it meet all of those needs that they need it to meet?
Yeah, and it seems. I know one of the things I taught my kids as early as possible is life's not fair, but the situation maybe isn't fair because these are people who have they've done without, so they could save, so they could have something for a rainy day, something to pass on to the next generation. These are not Rockefellers.
Right.
These are people that have a $100,000 CD that they have done with. Like I say, they eat. They don't go out to eat. If they do,
live a simple lifestyle.
Yes, I tease them sometimes. I say, do you have any mortgage? Oh goodness, no, we don't have a mortgage.
We paid off the house years ago.
Yeah, we don't have any debts. And I'm like, well, we can't run you for office because you're obviously unqualified. But we try to save what they have. And many times when we move it across the fence to the family does not treat it like it's theirs. They treat it as, hey, this is still mom and dad's money, and we're going to use this over mom and dad's lifetime to supplement whatever assistance that they qualify for. They all know, hey, if we use mom and dad's money, we're going to hell for this. So they hang on to that stuff.
They don't want to lose that money.
That's right. We live in a good area of the country.
Well, you mentioned the word family, and for both of you, I guess the fact that we're talking about maybe a veteran or a single person needing this assistance, but families being involved in the discussion.
Absolutely, family is critical to the discussion, and family that wants to work together is definitely a wonderful thing, and they want to help mom and dad live their best life possible.
Yeah, and it's another thing you said. What is something people can get out in front of as far as planning? And that would be the importance of a power of attorney. And I know we're going to talk about
that. Right, we'll have another show talking about that,
but
you need to mention that here, right.
But if you don't have a power of attorney, then it is more difficult to apply for the VA pension benefit.
Okay, so people need to be talking to their children in case of the senior citizens, and the children need to be perhaps sometimes asking these questions that they're sometimes afraid to ask.
Yes, and there is a lot of fear. There is the unknown. There's just that I don't want to cross that bridge right now. I don't want to talk about mom and dad going to the nursing home or possibly passing away. But it's life, and it's something that we do, I think, owe to our parents to have discussions about and with them and make sure that we understand as children exactly what they want so that we can really honor them in their later years with having those wishes fulfilled, if at all possible.
So two-way communication is very important. When you deal with your clients, you need to be hearing from both the family and the seniors.
Right. A lot of times it's all hands on deck.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So veterans benefits, we've mentioned the questions people come up with, how what they can apply. This information you have on your website really gets into more of the nitty gritty, the dollar amounts, the facts, the
It
figures.
does. It sets out those three different levels of compensation, what you need to qualify. It gives you enough, I think, to realize if it's something you want to look into or not.
Okay, yeah, so that's something that people need to ask that question. And even if they have questions, though, thinking I have too much money in the bank, there's still ways to look at that because you haven't
Yes.
looked at the costs.
Right, and it's better to go see somebody and actually talk to them about it, get another opinion rather than just assuming something and then you find out, 20 years down the road, there could have been a lot of assistance or help available that you just didn't know about. So always ask the questions, get in with a good elder law attorney, and I think that's critical. And I'll just say from my perspective, I always recommend people see an elder law attorney that specializes in all things to do with seniors and senior issues rather than just somebody who does wills or, they're great attorneys as well, but I really think that somebody who has a well-rounded knowledge of those issues involving our elders is the way to go.
So if things gotten, I guess, more complicated that people think, I can just handle it on my own. I've been handling my investments with my broker for years. Some of the seniors are hesitant to turn to somebody else for assistance.
They are, and it took me and my mom. I got my mom there last week, and it's taken us about 4 years to get her there, but I finally made it to the attorney with her because she was a do-it-herselfer.
Right. So you have to be willing to ask for assistance.
Absolutely.
In doing that. Other veterans benefits we've heard, of course, when veterans, when it comes time for funerals, you still have the opportunity for military ceremony. There's certain questions, but people can look into the VA with those as well.
Absolutely, and the hospitals and there's some veterans that actually qualify for TRICARE if they are military, career military. That's a supplement to Medicare, and they have a lot of really good benefits. So there's a lot of great benefits out there for our veterans.
And as we said at the beginning of the program, there are a lot of veterans out there who would qualify for this program, particularly.
Absolutely.
Basically, World War II on.
Yes.
We've had throughout the area. So, well, I'd like to thank you both for providing some information, as we say, on this series of programs, letting people know awareness, basically, that these opportunities are there and where they go for more information to try to answer that as we look at senior issues.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you for joining us this week as we have Spotlight on Senior Issues, continuing to look at topics of interest for the senior citizens in our community and our region. And I'm Judy Stiles. I hope you can join me again next week for another issue.